Yep. All right, so for this video, so I made a post the other day. We had a potential of a religious person who wanted to come and see kind of what we do and maybe ask some questions, have a conversation. And there was some good internal debate within some of the members of the church about whether we should or shouldn't do that. And so I wanted to bring up some points that I consider and then open it up for conversation to see what you all think. So I'll read through them real quick, and they are on the post for those who are interested in seeing those. So while having a religious person in our midst may make someone uncomfortable, we should be able to listen to and understand those who think differently from us. So that was one. And this was just more about the service. So we were gonna, and if this person comes in the future, we'll run the service as normal, we'll have the topic, we'll have conversation. And then those who like to have a conversation with the guests at the end are welcome to do so, but otherwise people could leave or bring popcorn and watch, whatever they'd like to do. Many of us were religious once, and it took us time to find our way to where we are now. And so I personally think it's important to offer our fellow humans time and space to do the same. And even if they do come with the intent to be disruptive, then all we have to do is ask them to leave. Thankfully, with the location where we are, with our security officers here, and we could simply ask them to intervene if it became hostile. So I wasn't particularly worried in that regard. Don't expect that to happen for sure, but just in case, I think we're well positioned to have that conversation. And then I definitely ask that everybody still come, even if they know that person's coming. Again, while it may be uncomfortable, and for many of us, this is a sanctuary, right? Because this is a place where we know we have people who understand our viewpoints and understand what we've gone through, and a lot of times some of the persecution that we might have faced in coming to be where we are in our understanding of the world. So my thought here is that if someone is coming with malice and trying to make us feel bad, basically, I would not want people to not show up, because in a way I think that's giving into them and giving into that malice and giving into that closed-mindedness. So I think that's been one of the struggles I think that non-religious people have faced over the years, is that it's easier for us to basically stay in the closet, right? It's easier for us to not have the conversation to explain to people, much like people who have gone through being homosexual before it was more widely accepted. It's not necessarily the same, but it has similarities. And so I think it's important for us, particularly if this person is coming to us, at least under the auspices that they just want to have a conversation, that we represent strongly. And not to say that we're aggressive or mean, but just to say, this is what we think these things are true and important. And especially within the framework that we've sort of discussed in terms of the humanist framework, skepticism is the key of what we are and who we are and how we should interpret and sense the world. And so we have to be skeptical not only of others' beliefs, but of our own as well. And so if they come in here and pitch a good religious game and convert some of us, that's fair. That's the market of ideas. I doubt that would happen, but we have to be open to that mindset, right? When it comes to, and this is the thing with politics as well, it's insane to me that we've come to accept, at least within the political parties, that they've come to accept that gerrymandering is a thing that should be done to protect their power, because the conflict of ideas and the shifting back and forth of ideas is the thing that helps us to grow. Because without conflict, we don't grow, we don't learn. So I think that part's really, really important. And then finally, I think this is a good test to see kind of where we are, right? Not only as a church, but as individuals. Where are we in relation to our comfort in what we find to be true and find to be useful for us in terms of a framework for understanding? And then where does that match up with maybe where we were, or maybe where this person is? So I just wanted to offer those thoughts up and then get any feedback back from you all to see what you think.
Having heard this person speak, he's a highly intelligent person. I don't think he would come in and be disruptive at all. I do think his goal is more on collecting intel than disruption or even conversion. I don't think he would.
Intel for a purpose of?
He teaches at a Christian school, and he may use our arguments for humanism as a way of teaching his students how to counter humanism when they encounter it in the secular world.
Okay.
So here, students, if you meet someone who says they're an atheist, these are the points you can bring up to try to convert them to Christianity.
So I think that's actually a really interesting conversation too, because in anticipation of him coming, I kind of just made a cursory review of what do both sides say the other ones are going to argue. So I read a number of articles online that said, this is how to win arguments with atheists, this is how to win arguments with Christianity. The thing I found to be most interesting is that all of them were trying to either prove or disprove points.
Right.
Which is why if you go back to the service that we talked about how to win emotional arguments, it's not about winning the argument and proving right or wrong, because most of the things are unprovable. So I think I posted earlier, to me, the conversation is more about, particularly from our framework, what thing is most useful? What thing is most useful for humanity? You know, what gains us, you know, does a religious framework or a non-religious framework gain us the most advantage? Now, from our assumptions that we start from, I think that ours is, right? Otherwise I wouldn't believe it, or I wouldn't follow it. Now they start with a different set of assumptions, and this is one of the big problems, is that when you argue about the assumptions, the baseline things from which you build your argument, unless somebody changes their assumptions, they're not going to change their conclusion. So instead of saying, well, you're wrong because of this, or there are these conflicts in your thing, or, well, you know, arguing with many of the arguments for atheists is the, you know, intelligent design or the complexity of the world and those sorts of things. You know, they find it unbelievable that the world of today could come to be without some sort of directing force behind it. That's one of their main arguments. So, but our fundamental set of assumptions is that we live in a universe that could have created infinite possibilities, and within infinite, which means literally everything, this is basically a guaranteed possibility because all things are possible. And so over a long enough timeline, enough iterations, the smallest possibility is likely to happen. And so those are fundamentally incompatible things, right? Because they believe that something this complex must be designed. So again, it's not neither. You can put the burden of proof on either side, but neither is going to win or lose because, for the most part, people aren't going to change their mind. So to me, instead of having these conversations of who is right and wrong, I think we should have conversations about what do we do? Because all of these are basically mind games, right? Whether or not we believe or don't believe, or whether or not you agree that this is true or not true, they're all debates in the academic environment. But when it comes to what we should do, that's something entirely different. What should we do when it comes to climate change? And if we can all agree that we should do something to mitigate climate change, well, then we're on the same team. It doesn't matter if you believe or don't believe. Whatever your motivation for doing the thing, to me, is much less relevant than the thing that you plan to do. So that's one of the things that I thought was very interesting, is that I don't anymore, and I have definitely done this in my younger days, I don't argue that God does or doesn't exist, because it doesn't matter to me. It is completely irrelevant to my daily operations, or even my life operations. I start from the fundamental assumption that I think, therefore I am, therefore I exist. I assume you all exist. I don't know it for sure because I can't prove it, other than I can sense you, but it all could be a trick of the matrix. I don't know. Doesn't matter though, because I'm gonna work on that assumption. I'm gonna build from that assumption that I exist, you all exist, and we all exist in the world together. And so from there, I just build up to say, all right, what do we need to do to maximize this existence? Maximize the continuing existence of humanity. And so to me, just partnering with people who are at least moderately aligned with what our end goal is, that's good. I don't care what they believe or don't believe and who's right and who's wrong, just that we get things done. So I do look forward to having this conversation, not just with this person, but with people in general, because I don't think this is a tack that non-religious people have taken as much in the past. It's been very, very academic in proving right and wrong and proving that things are logical or illogical. And I think you can definitely make academic arguments, and you could do logical proofs for the existence and non-existence and proof and able to prove or unable to prove. But again, at the end of the day, what does it mean for me? What do I get for them believing or me believing or not believing? And that's, I think, the conversation that we should kind of evolve to. So other thoughts and feedback on this conversation? Go ahead.
Did you see the article? In the original study was between Republicans and Democrats, but then because evangelicals are so caught up in the Republicans, they also took a study, religious versus non-religious. But those that are Republican, those that are religious, are those that have a primal instinct of fear, whereas those that are non-religious and Democrat tend to not have such a high fear response. And after I read that article, it made me a little more patient myself. Then I came up because I actually myself stopped believing because I was practicing to be a missionary. And so I studied world religions because I believed that all religions were the same, and that we just had different cultural understandings of it. And then I came to realize that it's all politics. And the Bible and the Torah and all are the greatest political texts ever written.
Yep, and that is absolutely one theory about religion, is that it's always been a measure of control. And so if you take out the argument of right or wrong on this specific bit of the Bible or the Quran or whatever it is, and you look at it as a framework, right? I was having this conversation with Matt the other day. So Matt's kind of like he's like the ghost co-founder of the church. He's helped me set up and refine a lot of these things. Hopefully we can get him out here sometime. You guys can meet him. Just so you know, he's not my imaginary friend, right? But we came to this. We were having a great conversation about what does this do? What does the church framework do for the world? And we came to he's a real big techie guy. He lives out in California, is trying to do some startup stuff out there. And what the church framework is, or the philosophical framework that underpins the church, is essentially a human operating system. And those other religions and other political frameworks were earlier versions of a human operating system. Now, they were not quite as, so some of them were very deliberately created, right? So they count the Council of Nicaea. They sat down and decided, what will Christianity be? And they said it will be this, 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 and this. Here are the books that we will use. Here are the books that we will throw away. Here are the pagan rituals that we're going to adopt to be able to be inclusive for people to get them hooked, right? It's the marketing techniques that they decided to use. And they decided that these were the things that would be Christianity. Now, it evolved out of things that had built out of 300 or so years of practice at the time, and people with different ideas about what Christianity should and shouldn't be, etc. But what they basically built was an operating system that helped people reckon with the world that they lived in. Helped them to figure out what was right and wrong. Helped them to figure out how we should interact with one another. Helped them to figure out where their place was in the world, to whom power belonged. And a lot of the things were very specifically political in terms of who owns property, who makes decisions, the patriarchy. All of those things were basically a humanity operating system. And so they are useful because for those who have not, particularly for those who have not taken the time, so like you said, you're studying to be a missionary, you took the time to think about why. But there are many people, we were having a conversation about finances today, who don't have the time or resources to spend sitting around thinking about stuff. They're still, even in our modern world, struggling for survival. And so for them, it's kind of a easily adoptable framework that they can use to then understand the world. Right? And we built additional frameworks over time to better understand things, better scientific frameworks, other political and religious frameworks. We've evolved the ones that we've had, right? But there are many religious people who don't believe that the Bible is literally the Word of God. They believe that it's a book of lessons and some historical, or some history, I should say, that help us to better understand who it is we are and where we should go and how we should act. And then there are some that think it is the literal Word of God, and that has grown to be one sect of the way that people think. But not everybody thinks that way. And so, go ahead.
And a lot of them are told, if you question, you don't have faith. And so that thinking shuts down.
Right. And so there was a really great article, I think it was today actually, in the New York Times, by a guy who's religious, and basically arguing for that religion isn't or should not be associated with political parties. There is always an aspect of religion and politics because, again, if that's your operating system, that's how you understand the world. But I remember that the Catholic Church came out very, very strongly against the immigration policy of separating children from families, right? When, and other Christian denominations did as well. So, no party has a monopoly on religion or Christianity or, non-belief. But we should think about them as operating systems, as ways to understand the world. And so I personally think ours is better, more refined, more consistent, and provides us with direct benefit in moving forward. So that was kind of the thought that I wanted to offer along those lines is that's kind of what we're doing here. We're trying to build a framework that helps us to better understand and be more effective in protecting and advancing humanity, because that's what our stated goal is. Now, and this is also a reason that I don't necessarily argue against the other ones. If that's the one that works for somebody and it helps them be a generally good person and we're moving in generally the same directions, then I'm fine with that. I don't need them to agree with me. Now, if they're going the opposite direction, then we have conflict, right? If it's those that are trying to tear down the establishments of the world because they believe in bringing about the apocalypse, we're going to have an issue. And it may just be an academic issue or a debate, but let's say over time that belief system gains a significant amount of followership, and you have people literally trying to bring the world down. That's cause for war, basically, if you think about it, because that's literally the survival of humanity. So, not that I'm trying to warmonger or rise the level of fear, but we have to realize what it is that we're doing, and so that's our goal is protect and advance humanity. And so hopefully this operating system works well. And if it doesn't, and if it's not as good as another one, then that's okay. Because one of the fundamental assumptions that I personally have about this church and this framework is that I don't know all the answers. If you think about it realistically, one person can't. And as we build it over time, the idea that we have is that we'll seed this church framework in different places and let people vary it. This isn't going to be the Catholic Church where I'm the Pope and dictate what will be the rules, but more of an open source platform that people can use and modify and see what works best. Because what works here for this group might not work somewhere else, in a different community, culture, group of people. So we have to be open. And if we don't, we end up in the same place that all the other churches are. Somebody operating the power structure for their benefit. And that's not at least not what I want this to be about. So other thoughts on the idea of having open discussion or anything else?
I think having open discussion is always great, but I coach debate, and so I think iron sharpens iron, and the more that you can openly discuss things, the better everything becomes. Because without that discussion, there's no understanding.
Right, and there's no reflection, right? The one thing about debate, I would say, is the discussions that so debate is one thing. It's a It's like it's like WWE wrestling, right? It's a scripted format of conflict, right? With specific rules and specific ways of engaging. It does help sharpen the mind, and it does help refine arguments. But I think it's a little bit different than than these kind of discussions between different religions, because a lot of times that's what we do. We debate, and we debate to win points, to win the argument, to say that I won this engagement. But the conversations that we have should be discussions to understand. They should include lots of, that's an interesting point that you made. I'm going to have to consider that. And then we don't come back and say anything necessarily other than to say that's interesting. That's an interesting point you made. I'm going to have to think more on that so that I can come up with a well-reasoned response or just consideration on that, so that we listen and we engage to understand versus to win. Because again, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong from my perspective. It matters if we're going in the same direction, and that's what we're considering. Are we going in the same direction generally? Can we disagree on certain things and then still move forward as a team, as a human team? That's really the question. So one of my favorite ones, favorite topics to bring up is abortion, because a lot of people are, they try and separate on opposing sides, which I think is ironic because I don't think they really have that different of goals, right? So it's either pro-choice or pro-life, right? Those are the two sides. But I would think that everybody's kind of anti-abortion, right? Nobody thinks that having more abortions is good, right? So I think we can all say that having fewer abortions would be good, either educating on the front end or having the right sort of support networks available. That would be good. And then we ask the question, all right, if we agree on that goal, right, setting goals, just like we talked about finance, which way is most effective to achieve that goal? And there are statistically valid studies out there that show that this way is better than this way. Sexual education is better than abstinence at preventing unwanted pregnancies, period. It's just regular science, it's fine. Science isn't, again, that's not a monopoly of either party or religious versus non-religious at all. So those are the kind of conversations we need to have. Do we all believe that gun violence should go down? That would be a good goal? I think probably. How do we do that? And how do we do that culturally appropriately in America? Right? Because if we say, well, there will be no more guns, that's an unrealistic outcome because we live in America, realistically. Okay? So, but what things can we do? Most people agree universal background checks. Closing the gun show loophole. Yes, it does put an additional burden on some people. And we have to understand that. And then we say, but what are the outcomes? Is it beneficial? And we could even do tests. This is the crazy thing with politics that I think people have, I don't know if they've never questioned it or whatever it is, but can we not just do tests? Can we not do test runs? Do beta tests, just like they do with software? Say, hey, for this area, we're going to try this and see what happens. And then if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, great.
One of the aspects of that gun control issue is that they need to update the mental medical issues. Because if you read, there are absolutely wretched, unless the judge says, okay, you lose your rights.
But see, those are all conversations that we can have. Right. And with any rule, it's not going to be perfect. When you apply a rule to a huge population, it's not going to work for some of them. But we got to argue about the most good. How are we doing the most good? Or the least harm, right? And those are different goals. And argue about which of those we need to have. So those are the kind of conversations that I think that we can get into, all looking to move forward together, as opposed to being on opposing sides of a line or a table.
And you make a good point, because everything is connected. And you can't take a look at anything in a vacuum, because they all in some way connects to something else. And that's one mistakes. And this, going back to the early point thing of being able to take and talking, and that was my point was, when you get together and you talk and iron sharpens iron, you take and get down to the essence of the issue,
right,
and the right direction, not trying to score points, which is what we have come to in Congress now.
Yeah.
And where it needs to get back. If you watched the trial Friday, the hearing Friday, and everything, Flake and Corman got up and, talk. That's more what we need.
Keep drilling down, drilling down.
And demanding reasonable conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. So thanks for your feedback. If people have more feedback or other things they want to discuss or want to throw up on Facebook on engaging in different ways, I think those are good. So we're always looking to grow and refine and become better at, having something that you guys actually are interested in engaging in, or figuring out ways that the church better fits, what it is we're trying to accomplish. So again, we're always open to feedback. I do not have all the answers. I do spend, the limited amount of time I have thinking about things and trying to refine the ideas to make them more better understandable and more easy to have a conversation about, but can't do it all, and I appreciate all your guys' feedback. So thanks very much.
Oh, I have a question.